My son said he'd use my retirement for himself, like he was asking for extra salt. He didn't blink when he said it. He just slid a single sheet across my Sunday table and tapped where my signature should go. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. It was Sunday, October 27th, roast chicken cooling, 6:12 p.m. Savannah twilight leaning in through the kitchen blinds. The paper he pushed at me was smooth from a printer that works harder than he does. Temporary access authorization. One paragraph down, a line in bold. ACH authorization. Grant agent ability to initiate transfers. The account nickname matched my IRA, 482 sur 14 Vergeton, 77 QU3. I knew that number the way a mechanic knows torque specs. I'd read it just that morning, sitting with coffee and Ellen's old floral mug. Just a bridge, Ethan said, tone bright like a pitch deck. 2 weeks. My investor call is Monday. I can't show weakness. I picked up the sheet and held it to the light. The paper was so thin I could see the watermark and the shape of the trap at the same time. You wrote agent, I said. Not co-signer. He grinned like I'd caught a magic trick he wanted me to applaud. Language, he said. It's all the same. It isn't, I said. At the sink, Rosa, my sister, stopped scrubbing the roasting pan. The water hissed, then went quiet. She dried her hands and turned, her nurse's face replacing her Sunday face. What's the interest? Timeline? Collateral? She asked. Rosa doesn't flirt with facts. She marries them. 18% projected, Ethan said. Eyes on me, not her. Just need access. I'll replace it in weeks. You're talking about the money I eat with, I said. The money I turn lights on with. My retirement, not a revolving door. The clock in the hallway ticked. A gull cried somewhere beyond the live oaks. I slid the sheet back across the table. He didn't pick it up. He just kept smiling, the way salesmen do when they think the problem is your mood and not their math. Dad, it's not even your principal, he said. It's just liquidity. Don't be dramatic. I reached for my ledger, the one that has oil fingerprints baked into the paper from 2001 forward, and wrote the line with a ballpoint that leaves grooves. Oct 27. Ethan asked for ACH access. I refused. I underlined refused until the pen bit the grain. He sighed like I'd dented his car. You taught me to take swings, he said. Now you're mad I'm taking one. I taught you to measure twice, I said. You're measuring me. He flinched. He tried again. We can't miss this window. Investors want family buy-in. It signals stability. A forged signal is instability, Rosa said, stepping closer. Her voice was soft, but the softness had a backbone. If you love your father, stop talking to him like a line item. The edges came off his smile. For a second, I saw the 8-year-old who used to hand me 9/16 wrenches without asking. Then the 35-year-old returned, all angle and hurry. He gathered the paper and tucked it into his folio. I'll swing by tomorrow, he said, as if I'd be softer at breakfast. Think about it. I did, I said. All summer. After he left, I washed my hands at the sink and couldn't get the slick off. Rosa touched my shoulder. He's deep in something, she said. Debt or pride? Maybe both. I took the 1968 Ford F-100 keys off the hook and rolled the brass in my palm. The truck sat in the garage like a friend who never asks for anything. Its title, original, my name alone, slept in the file cabinet in the back room under T for truck, next to tax receipts, $5,980 for 2024. I went to the cabinet, pulled the title, and laid it under the kitchen light. Then I opened the IRA statement again, aligned the corners, and looked from paper to paper until my pulse steadied. On my phone, the garage camera showed a still frame of the concrete floor, the red diode winking. I could smell old oil and cold metal just from the memory of it. I set the phone face down, kissed my thumb, and touched Ellen's photo, the one I keep by the door. If you were here, You'd say no faster than I did, I told the glass. In the ledger, beneath the line I'd written, I added a second. He thinks I'm a bank. I'm a man. Then I closed the book, locked the back door, and slid the spare key from the planter into my pocket. The night had the taste of salt and coming weather. Somewhere, a compressor kicked on in my head. The old shop rhythm returning. Tomorrow, I decided, I'd stop defending the money and start defending the boundaries. Monday felt wrong from the moment I woke up. The house smelled like yesterday's roast and bad decisions. I made coffee that tasted like metal, sat at the table, and stared at the empty chair where Ethan had been. The temporary access form still ghosted my mind. His smirk, his confidence, his belief that he could bulldoze me with charm and a printer. I checked the porch twice before remembering I'd moved the spare key from under the planter. That old habit of trust had to die young. I tucked the key into my wallet, where paper and metal could remind each other what security looked like. At 10:05 a.m., a text came through. Don't be dramatic. Signed today. Need confirmation before noon. I deleted it without answering. The phone chimed again immediately. Same number, same tone. If we miss this window, it's on you. At 1:30, I walked into my garage, that old cathedral of oil and echo. The parts ledger sat on the workbench, pages yellowed from 2 decades of sweat. I opened it to the earliest entry. June 14, 2001. $18 bearings, $62 hoses. My handwriting then was straighter, steadier. Every line in that book was proof that a life could be built one bolt at a time. I ran my finger over the ink ridge and felt my pulse come back. My sister Rosa called from her break room at the hospital. I could hear a heart monitor beeping faintly behind her. "Henry," she said, "he's drowning. You can't let him pull you under." I wanted to tell her I already felt the undertow, but my throat stayed tight. "He's your son," she said gently. "But he's also a grown man. Let him learn the difference between a father and a bailout." I didn't answer right away. The clock on the garage wall ticked louder than her voice. "Promise me one thing," she said. "Don't make decisions while you're hurt." "I won't," I said. "I'll make them while I'm awake." By 4:40 p.m., I was sitting at the kitchen table again. IRA statement open beside the CD certificate, $38,600, matures Dec 15. I circled that date 3 times with a red pen. The sight of those numbers should have brought comfort. But all I saw were teeth marks. Ethan's words chewing through the margin. As dusk fell, I walked the property line behind the bungalow. Spanish moss hung low, catching the last light. Across the yard, the garage camera blinked, a small red pulse against the dark. I opened the app on my phone and watched the live feed. A still shot of my workbench, the F-100's polished hood, the steel drawers I'd built myself. That image steadied me like medication. Then guilt arrived, the way it always does. Quiet, but heavy. I wondered where I'd gone wrong raising him. Maybe I'd given him too many answers, not enough consequences. Maybe love had made me lazy about boundaries. The phone buzzed again, a voicemail this time. I let it play through the speaker, his voice filling the empty room. "Dad, you're overreacting. You've got money just sitting there. You said yourself you can't take it with you. I can double it in 6 months. Don't be stupid." The words hit harder than I expected. "Don't be stupid." I saved the voicemail. Not out of pettiness, out of habit. Mechanics document everything. By 7 p.m., I sat at my desk and opened the red ledger again. Under yesterday's entry, I wrote, "Oki 28. Pressure continues. Same ask, new tone. Recorded voicemail." Then another line. "I'm not confused. I'm insulted." I pressed the pen so hard the paper almost tore. Rosa texted a few minutes later, "Sleep if you can. Tomorrow's a work day for your brain." I stared at her message until the words blurred. I wanted to believe tomorrow would be better, but I'd seen this pattern before. Smooth talk, guilt, escalation, In the garage, the red diode blinked again on my phone screen. The sound of distant thunder rolled across the marsh. I turned off the kitchen light and stood in the doorway, the silhouette of the F-100 framed in the camera feed. My father used to say, "Never let anyone borrow what they haven't earned." I whispered it into the dark like a prayer. Then I closed the app, locked every door, and sat at the table until the porch clock struck midnight. Just a man, a ledger, and a plan beginning to form like a blueprint in his head. October 29th began with the low hum of resolve. The sky over Savannah was pearl gray, and the marsh beyond my yard looked like brushed steel. I brewed my coffee stronger than usual and laid out 3 papers on the table: my IRA statement, my CD certificate, and the voicemail transcription I'd typed last night. Every digit, every line, was a reminder that my security had been earned, not gifted. By 9:15 a.m., I drove downtown to the Savannah Coastal Credit Union, the same branch where Ellen and I opened our first joint account in 1977. The marble floor still squeaked under my boots. Dana, the branch manager, recognized me immediately. "Mr. Hale, haven't seen you in years," she said. I leaned on the counter and told her everything, quietly, carefully, without shame. When I finished, she pursed her lips. "You're not the first parent to face this," she said. "Let's lock it down." By 9:40, we'd set up wire blocks on both accounts. Required in-person ID for any transfers over $5,000, and flagged Ethan's name in the system with a restricted contact note. She printed a confirmation sheet, transaction control authorization, and stamped it with the blue credit union seal. The time read 10:07 a.m. "Keep this copy safe," she said, sliding it toward me. "If anyone calls pretending to be you, we'll call you first." "Appreciate it," I said. "I'll make sure you're never the villain in this story." Before heading home, I stopped at a red brick building off Bull Street. Layton, Pierce, and Weller, elder law attorneys. The brass letters on the door looked old-fashioned but polished. Inside, Mr. Layton, a silver-haired man with the calm patience of someone who has seen every flavor of betrayal, invited me to sit. "Tell me what happened," he said. I placed the papers in front of him. Voicemail transcript on top. He read quietly, nodding once at certain words, the way a surgeon nods before an incision. "Mr. Hale," he said finally, "you're not paranoid. You're prudent. We'll build a firewall, a living trust for your house, your shop, and that Ford pickup you mentioned. We'll name you trustee and your sister as successor. That way, no one can use your assets as collateral without your signature. And even if they try, the records will choke them before they can breathe." He opened his planner. "Let's schedule the trust signing for Monday, November 4th. We'll file the deed transfer the same day." He paused. "You said your son has a key to your house?" "Yes," I said. "One spare, under the planter since 2010. He smiled softly. "Lose the planter, Mr. Hale," I laughed. "First time in days." "Consider it gone." By 3:10 p.m., I left his office with a thin folder labeled Preliminary Trust Documents and a retainer receipt for $2,100. I paid half up front, check numero 42, and recorded the number in my ledger. Outside, the clouds had cleared into the color of clean aluminum. On the way home, I stopped at Harbor Tech Supply and bought a camera upgrade kit. 4 4K motion sensors and a new DVR box, $249 even. The clerk asked if I wanted installation help. I told him, "I've been wiring things since before you were born." That night, the house smelled faintly of solder and victory. I mounted 2 sensors inside the garage, one facing the workbench, another pointed at the roll-up door. When I flipped the switch, a red light blinked once. Steady, alert, alive. Rosa came by after her shift with a bag of groceries and her nurse's calm. She set down eggs, milk, and a tin of her chicken stew. "You look lighter," she said. "I am," I said, tightening a screw on the camera mount. Tomorrow, Ethan will still think he's 2 steps ahead. He just doesn't know I've started measuring the floor. She smiled faintly. You always were a builder. Build this wall right. At 9:20 p.m., I opened my ledger and logged the day, .OCT29. Credit union. Wire block set. 5K cap. Verification rule. Attorney retained, trust in motion, NOV 4 signing. Cameras upgraded. Then I drew a box around one phrase. Paper beats panic. Before bed, I stood in the doorway of the garage and watched the F100 under its tarp. The new camera's red diode blinked slow and steady, reflected in the chrome bumper like a tiny heartbeat. Some men sleep beside alarm systems. I slept beside proof. Tomorrow, I told myself, I'd start moving from defense to strategy. The trust would be the foundation. The rest would be architecture. Quiet, careful, unbreakable. October 31st arrived crisp and cold, sunlight spilling across the porch like warm brass. The air smelled faintly of salt and oak leaves. I'd always liked Halloween, mostly because it's the one day of the year when people show you who they are under masks. And that day, my son's mask was about to slip. At 9:00 a.m., I was sitting in Mr. Layton's office again, pen in hand, signing page after page of the living trust. My signature, firm and deliberate, crawled across each line like a border wall. The trust placed the bungalow, the garage, the shop's contents, and the 1968 Ford F100 squarely under my name as trustee, with Rosa as successor. The IRA and CD would remain intact, protected under advisory notice from the credit union. Keep your copies locked away, Layton said. And remember, if anyone waves papers at you again, send them to me. He stamped the packet, sealed it, and handed over 2 certified copies. The folder had weight. It wasn't just paper. It was armor. On my way home, I stopped by the DMV branch on East Victory Drive to complete the title transfer for the F100 into the trust. The clerk, a young man with freckles and a nervous smile, typed quietly, then printed the confirmation slip. "Congratulations, sir," he said, sliding the paper toward me. "She's officially protected." That night, I sat in the garage with the truck, its turquoise paint dull in the yellow bulb light, and felt a stillness I hadn't felt since Ellen's funeral. I turned the key in the ignition. The engine hummed like an old promise kept. The next day, November 1st, I drove to Brown's Hardware for a new padlock set. Thick, stainless steel, and loud when it clicked. The receipt read 29/116, timestamp 3:42 p.m. I stapled it into my ledger under locks and marked the key rings with red tape. Then I drove to my old storage unit off Chatham Parkway, where the air smelled of cardboard and distance. I rented unit number D12, $89 a month, and started moving the shop's most valuable tools. The snap-on torque wrench, the Miller welder, serial 7SASAMU845, the 1975 drill press my father had given me. I logged each piece into a new tool inventory sheet, date, serial, and value, written in my careful block letters. Rosa helped haul boxes. "Feels like packing up history," she said. "Feels like putting it somewhere safe," I corrected. By the time we finished, the storage unit's padlock clicked shut with a sound that meant I could finally breathe. That evening, I opened my phone and found a new message from Ethan. No greeting, just a photo of a pitch deck slide showing 18% projected return and family-backed stability. Beneath it, his text read, "Need terms final by Monday." "Don't drag your feet," I didn't reply. I simply stared at the words family-backed until they lost meaning. He was selling my name like a coupon code. At 7:00 p.m., I called Dana at the credit union. "If he tries to connect my accounts again?" I asked. She smiled through the line. "He won't get past me, Mr. Hale. Your alerts are solid. You'll get a ping before he even hits send." "Good," I said. I like warnings. When the sun dipped, I returned to the garage and began installing the final camera upgrade. The new system hummed as it synced, screen blinking in steady rhythm. I adjusted the motion sensor above the door and tested it. One flash of red light, one sharp chime echoing through the space. Perfect. Then, using a thick marker, I made a laminated sign and hung it inside the garage door track at eye level. Smile. You're on camera. A small joke, maybe, but I wanted that to be the first sentence anyone saw if they ever stepped where they didn't belong. By 9:45, I sat at the workbench under the yellow light. The day's receipts fanned in front of me like a hand of cards. Padlock, storage rent, DMV title confirmation. Beside them, I placed my red ledger and wrote Oct 31. Trust executed. Title transferred. Padlocks installed. Tools secured. Cameras upgraded. Ethan silent. Peace temporary. I closed the book, turned off the lights, and let the garage fall dark except for that faint red diode blinking in rhythm. When I lay down to sleep, I realized something. I hadn't stopped my son yet. I'd just drawn the blueprint for his failure. Tomorrow, I'd start building the walls he couldn't climb. November 5th arrived colder, sharper, as if the air itself had started to eavesdrop. I woke early and spread my documents across the kitchen table. The trust packet, IRA statement, blocked transfer form, and title confirmation. Each sheet a small shield. At 8:30 a.m., I walked to the post office. The line was short, and the smell of ink and cardboard hung in the air. I sent 3 certified letters to Ethan's address, each labeled Notice of Revocation and Limited Contact. Inside, copies of the trust declaration, the wire block confirmation, and a typed statement that began, effective immediately. All financial matters are to be directed through counsel. No exceptions. The clerk stamped each envelope 6.45 per letter and handed me 3 tracking receipts. I folded them neatly and tucked them into my wallet. At 11:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. The credit union's alert banner flashed red. Attempted external ACH. Flagged and blocked. I called Dana immediately. She answered on the first ring. Mr. Hale, we stopped it. Same routing number he tried last week. Looks like he used your old signature on file from years back. My chest tightened, then eased. And you flagged it? Already reported to our fraud desk. You're safe. After we hung up, I printed the alert, highlighted the timestamp, and slid it into my binder under Finance. Then I took a black marker and wrote across the margin. He's desperate now. The day stretched long. Around 6:02 p.m., the phone rang again. I let it go to voicemail, then played it back on speaker while I wrote. You're being stubborn, old man. It's just a short-term bridge loan. You'll get it back, plus interest. You can't take it with you anyway. His tone wasn't anger. It was entitlement wearing confidence like cologne. I wrote each phrase, word for word, in the ledger. Nov, 5, Ethan voicemail. Pressure language. Bridge loan. Interest. Can't take it with you. The pen dug into the page. That evening, Rosa stopped by after her shift, still in scrubs. She carried a pot of homemade pozole, steaming through the plastic lid. She set it on the stove, her eyes tired but fierce. He called me, she said. What did he say? That you're being manipulated by lawyers. That he's just unlocking dormant capital. She crossed her arms. He's losing grip? I nodded. He'll test every latch before giving up. Then tighten the locks, she said. At 8:30, I did just that. I went to the garage and knelt by the floor, safe bolted beneath my workbench. Inside was every critical document. Titles, statements, receipts. I removed them, placed them into the red binder, and carried it inside. The garage suddenly looked emptier, the safe base exposed like bone. I laid a clean canvas drop cloth over it, smooth and neat. Then, in the space above the workbench, I hung something new. A pegboard wall displaying enlarged bank alert printouts, a copy of the trust cover page, and the blocked ACH notification. Each sheet laminated, each corner pinned straight. It looked like a mechanic's version of a war map, my proof arrayed like tools. When I stepped back, the overhead bulb reflected off the lamination, giving each document a faint glow. At 9:15, I set my phone to record and walked around the garage, narrating quietly. November 5th. Garage organized, evidence secured, safe removed for protection. No valuables left. I uploaded the clip to a private cloud folder labeled Insurance, password shared only with Rosa. Before heading inside, I caught my reflection in the chrome of the truck bumper. The man staring back wasn't scared anymore. He looked tired, sure, but focused, like someone tightening the last bolt on something that mattered. Back inside, Rosa was sitting at the table, stirring her soup slowly. "He'll come soon," she said. "I know," I replied. "That's why the garage is ready." When she left, I turned off all the lights except the one over the sink. The house went quiet, holding its breath. I sat at the table and wrote one final note for the night. Nov 5. Certified letters sent. ACH blocked. Voicemail saved. Garage prepped. He's running out of invisible doors. Outside, wind pressed against the siding like someone testing windows. The cameras blinked red in the darkness. I didn't flinch. Some men wait for storms. I build roofs before the clouds arrive. Tomorrow, I'd reinforce the final wall. The lock on the only door Ethan still thought was his. The garage. November 8th came with a sky the color of gunmetal and a wind that rattled the palm fronds against the fence. I'd slept maybe 3 hours. The plan that had taken shape in my head was ready for steel and screws. At 9:30 a.m., the locksmith truck from Brown's Locksmith and Keys pulled into the drive. The tech, a young man with tattoos peeking from his cuffs, whistled when he saw the size of the garage door. "Old school setup," he said. "Built it myself," I replied. We replaced the handle, cylinder, and latch plate with a grade 3 keyway, fresh brass that gleamed against the worn paint. He handed me 2 keys and an invoice stamped paid, $162, Nov 8, 9:58 a.m. I signed and stapled it into my binder under locks before he'd even packed up his tools. By afternoon, Troy, my former shop foreman, arrived in his pickup. "You sure about this, boss?" he asked, glancing at the tarp-covered F-100. "She's safer away from home," I said. Together, we rolled the truck out, its tires crunching over the gravel. The sunlight caught the chrome, and for a second it looked like the past was driving away. Troy would store her in his barn off Highway 17. Title already reassigned to the trust and insurance, switched to his name as custodian. "Don't worry," he said, patting the hood. "I'll keep her warm." "Keep her hidden," I corrected. When I returned, the garage floor bore a ghostly rectangle of dust where the truck had sat for 45 years. I took a photo and printed it, proof of absence, and tacked it beside the pegboard display of documents. The space looked clean, deliberate, unsettling. That evening, I got an email from Investor Relations Horizon Ventures. "Com, Mr. Hale. Could you please confirm your support of Ethan Hale's startup proposal? He has listed your property and vehicle as collateral under family assets." My pulse slowed, not spiked. This was the moment. I forwarded the message to Mr. Layton with one sentence. "He's over the line." His reply came 4 minutes later. "Boardroom meeting scheduled tomorrow. Nov 10, 2 p.m. Be early. Bring evidence." I printed the email and slid it into my binder behind a tab labeled Truth. That night, I made one last modification to the garage. On a shelf above the workbench sat a small motion-activated speaker, a $42 gadget I'd ordered weeks ago for a prank that now had purpose. I connected it to my phone and uploaded the voicemail Ethan had left on October 28th. trimmed to its cruelest line. I'm going to use your retirement for myself. When motion triggered, it would play his own voice back at him. I tested it twice. The timing was perfect. 1 second delay, crisp volume. Before locking up, I stood in the center of the garage and looked around. The pegboard with laminated evidence. The empty safe base beneath the drop cloth. The faint tire tracks leading nowhere. Every piece of it felt like a chessboard already set. I wrote in my ledger, Nov 8. Garage recade. Truck moved. Motion device armed. Investor email surfaced. Leighton scheduled boardroom 11:10. War begins in daylight. Then, almost as an afterthought, I scribbled another line beneath it. He won't see the trap. He'll just see the door. At 10:45 p.m., the cameras pinged once. Motion on the driveway. A raccoon nosing through the trash. Still, the alert made me smile. The system worked. Everything was listening now. I went to bed with the binder on the nightstand and the locksmith receipt folded inside the front cover. The paper made a faint crackle when I breathed. It was the sound of boundaries hardening into law. Before sleep took me, I whispered to the dark room, "Tomorrow, he'll think it's a business meeting. He'll find out it's a mirror." Outside, the wind pressed against the new lock. It held firm. Inside, the clock ticked toward the hour when silence would stop being passive and become evidence. November 10th, 2:00 p.m. Horizon Ventures Conference Room, Savannah. The place smelled like citrus disinfectant and ambition. Whiteboards covered with numbers, coffee cups half full, and men in slim suits tapping at laptops. I walked in wearing the same leather jacket I'd owned since 1985. I didn't need to look like them. I only needed to tell the truth. Mr. Leighton was already seated. Briefcase open, papers stacked with surgical precision. Across the polished oak table sat Ethan, flanked by 2 men, investors, or at least the kind that orbit promises. Behind them, a young woman from compliance adjusted her glasses, fingers poised on her keyboard. Ethan grinned the moment he saw me. "Dad! Glad you could make it. I figured it'd be good optics for you to show support in person." Leighton didn't smile. "We're here to clarify ownership, not optics," he said. His voice carried the same calm as a loaded revolver. The older investor leaned back. "Mr. Hale, your son tells us you're offering your shop and assets as collateral for his expansion loan. We just need verification." "Is that what he told you?" I said, pulling the red binder from my bag. "Then let's verify." I opened it slowly. Page by page, the way a man unfolds a flag at a funeral. Exhibit A. Living Trust Declaration, dated October 31st. First, notarized and sealed, listing me as sole trustee. Exhibit B. Title transfer for the 1968 Ford F-100, now property of the trust. Exhibit C. Wire block confirmation from Savannah Coastal Credit Union. No transfers authorized without in-person ID. Exhibit D. Blocked ACH notification with timestamp. Nov 5, 11:17 a.m. Exhibit E. The investor email Ethan had sent, listing family assets under collateral. I slid them across the table, the paper whispering like dry leaves. The compliance officer scanned the trust document first, her brow furrowed. "This is comprehensive," she said. "Mr. Hale, your name appears on every title. There's no legal way these assets could be used as collateral." Leighton nodded. "Which means any reference to family-backed assets is a misrepresentation. Intentional or negligent, your choice." The younger investor straightened in his chair. "Ethan, did you tell us your father consented?" Ethan's grin cracked at the edges. "It was implied," he said quickly. "He's just overprotective." Leighton placed the voicemail transcript on top of the pile. "Is this your voice?" he asked. "I'm going to use your retirement for myself." The words filled the room like the smell of ozone before lightning. The investors exchanged looks. The compliance officer closed her laptop. "I think that's all we need," she said quietly. Ethan turned red. "You're twisting it." It was a joke. I was venting. "It was recorded," I said evenly. "On October 28th, 7:19 p.m. Time and date stamped." One of the investors pushed back his chair. "Mr. Hale, we'll need to pause our participation pending review." The other simply muttered, "Good luck cleaning this up." When they left, the silence felt heavier than the air-conditioning hum. Ethan stood, jaw tight, eyes darting between me and Leighton. "You set me up," he hissed. "No," I said, gathering my binder. "You built the setup yourself. I just kept the receipts." He slammed his palm on the table. "You humiliated me." I met his eyes. "No, son. I gave you a mirror." Leighton stood and adjusted his jacket. "Meeting adjourned," he said, calm as ever. "Compliance will follow up." Outside, the late afternoon sun hit me like fresh air after a storm. I could feel the heat of it on my neck, the kind of warmth that comes only when a man's name has been returned to him. Ethan caught up in the parking lot, his voice brittle. "Dad, please, you don't understand how bad this is for me." I stopped, turned to face him. "I understand perfectly," I said. "You tried to use my life as a stepping stone. You tripped instead." He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes glassy. "You could have helped me." "I did," I said. "I stopped you before you ruined yourself." He swallowed hard but didn't answer. When he finally walked away, the sound of his shoes on the pavement was small and lost. I climbed into my truck. Troy had returned it that morning, spotless, and looked in the mirror one last time. The face staring back wasn't angry. It was finished. Before I drove off, I called Leighton. "Thank you," I said. He chuckled softly. "All we did was show the truth, Henry. Truth always does the heavy lifting." And for the first time in months, I laughed, a short, genuine laugh that echoed through the cab. The trap had sprung, clean and lawful. Tomorrow, the world would start to see Ethan the way I now did. Not as my heir, but as a cautionary tale. The morning after the boardroom ambush, the air in Savannah felt lighter, like the storm had finally emptied itself. The light through the blinds painted the kitchen gold. I sat with a cup of black coffee, watching the steam rise, the red binder resting on the table beside me like a quiet companion. At 9:14 a.m., my phone buzzed with an email from Dana at the credit union. Subject: ACH attempt, logged message. Another transfer attempt detected. $4,280 flagged and blocked automatically. Account remains secure. Thought you'd like to know? I smiled, slow and tired. He still thinks the door's unlocked, I muttered. I printed the email and slid it behind the tab marked Finance in the binder. Then I took a pen and wrote across the margin. Nov 11. Attempt number 2 failed. Locks holding. At 11:22, Leighton called. His voice was steady as always, but I could hear a trace of satisfaction hiding behind the professionalism. "Compliance from Horizon Ventures just sent an internal memo," he said. "They've removed Ethan from the proposal and frozen his account until further notice. His co-founders are requesting a full audit." "Good," I said. "Maybe Truth will finally pay him back, with interest." "There's more," Leighton added. The same email was forwarded to 2 local banks. "If he tries to use your name again, he's flagged across the system." That one hit different. I leaned back and looked at the ceiling. The hum of the refrigerator sounded like applause. By 1 p.m., Rosa stopped by on her lunch break. She carried a small box of fried chicken and a grin that didn't need explanation. "Heard from the grapevine," she said. "One of my patient's sons works at Horizon. Said your boy's name's Mud now." "News travels fast in a small city," I said. "Faster when it smells like scandal." She nodded toward the binder. "You keeping that close?" "Closer than blood," I said. We ate quietly, the kind of silence only family who's been through fire can share. At 3:45, I drove to the Savannah Police Department, just to make things official. The officer at the desk was polite, bored, but attentive enough when I explained what had happened. He filed a report labeled Information Only, Financial Misrepresentation, Attempted Fraud, and gave me a copy stamped with the date and time. "This isn't criminal yet," he said, "but if he pushes again, it'll turn real fast." "That's all I needed," I said. A timestamp. When I got home, I slid the report behind the legal tab in my binder and wrote at the top of the page, "Evidence doesn't yell. It waits." As the day faded, I took a slow walk through the house. The sound of my footsteps against the hardwood floor was steady, confident. The same boards Ethan once raced across as a kid now creaked under the weight of my peace. I paused at the doorway to the garage. The space was cleaner than it had been in years. The pegboard hung like a gallery wall, each laminated document catching the last of the sunlight. The empty safe base sat under the drop cloth, ghostly but satisfying. I flipped on the light. The hum of the fluorescent bulb filled the space. My voice recorder was still mounted on the workbench, and the motion sensor's red diode blinked like a heartbeat. I sat on the stool, watching the shadows stretch across the concrete. Somewhere outside, a car passed, slow, cautious. Probably him, driving by again. I didn't move. The locks would tell the story if he ever tried the handle. At 7:52 p.m., Leighton called once more. "It's done," he said. "No further action required. Compliance closed the file. Your trust stands. Your accounts are sealed. You've got full legal protection." "Then it's over?" I asked. He hesitated. "On paper, yes. Emotionally? That's up to you," I laughed under my breath. "Paper's enough for now." After we hung up, I poured myself a small bourbon and stood at the kitchen window. Outside, the marsh grass swayed under the moonlight, silver and slow. I raised the glass and whispered, "Here's to locks that work and lessons that stick." The red binder sat open on the counter, pages fanned like wings. Justice hadn't come with sirens or handcuffs. It came with emails, signatures, stamps, and a silence so deep you could finally hear yourself think. Before bed, I opened the ledger and wrote the last line of the day. Nov. 11. He tried again. Failed again. Justice quiet, but final. Then I closed the book, turned off the light, and let the dark return to being just darkness. Not a threat, not a weight, just night. It's strange how silence can sound different once the noise dies down. After weeks of tension, the quiet in my house wasn't heavy anymore. It was whole. The clocks ticked again. The wind found its rhythm through the trees, and for the first time in months, I didn't flinch when my phone vibrated. November 12th, 8 a.m. I woke early and sat at the kitchen table with a fresh pot of coffee. The red binder open like a diary of survival. Every receipt, stamp, and notarized seal lay in perfect order. No chaos, no confusion, just proof. Proof that a man's steadiness can outlast his son's ambition. Ellen's picture watched from the wall, her smile soft and knowing. I could almost hear her say, "Measure twice. Henry, always measure twice." After breakfast, I drove to the workshop I used to run before retirement, the same one Ethan once called Dad's Museum. Troy was there, wiping grease from his hands. My F-100 sat in the corner of the bay, polished and waiting, turquoise gleaming under the skylight. "She's ready to go home whenever you are," he said. I smiled. "Not yet. Let her rest here a while. Home's safe, but this place feels honest." He nodded, reading more in my voice than I said. "You did right, boss. Don't let him make you doubt that." "I won't," I said, "but I'll always wish it hadn't come to this." I drove home slowly, passing the same stretch of live oaks Ethan and I used to walk under when he was little. I remembered him holding my hand, asking how engines breathe. I used to tell him, they don't. They inhale work and exhale motion. Somewhere between then and now, he stopped building things and started selling them. That evening, I took out a stack of stationery paper, cream-colored, the kind Ellen liked, and began writing letters I'd never send. Letter 1 was to Ethan. Son, I didn't protect the money from you. I protected you from what it could turn you into. If you ever decide to fix instead of flip, you'll find me in the garage. Letter 2 was to myself. You are not just a father who lost his son for a while. You are a craftsman who kept his foundation intact. Letter 3 was to Ellen. You were right. Love without limits isn't kindness. It's neglect in disguise. I sealed all 3 in separate envelopes and slid them into my toolbox under the wrench tray. Tools and truths kept together. Later that night, Rosa called. You sleeping any better? She asked. Better, I said. Still wake up once or twice, but it's just habit. The house doesn't feel like it's listening anymore. Good, she said softly. You did everything by the book, Henry. I'm proud of you. Her words stayed with me long after the call ended. For weeks I'd been fueled by defense, bank alerts, locks, paper trails. But now what I felt wasn't vengeance. It was recovery. Around 9:12 p.m. I went out to the porch. The November air was crisp, smelling faintly of pine and rain. Across the marsh, lights blinked from distant houses, other people living their quiet victories and failures. I sipped coffee and listened to the night sounds. Inside, the garage camera feed played silently on my phone. Nothing but still frames of tools, paper, and light. No motion, no threats, just peace. Before heading in, I grabbed my green binder, a new one, cleaner, lighter than the red. I started transferring the most important pages. The trust, the title, the bank alerts, the notarized statements. On the cover, I wrote in thick black pen, Lessons. When I finished, I looked around my kitchen. Warm lamplight on wood grain, the faint hum of the fridge, the comforting imperfection of home. I realized something then. Justice isn't just what happens in courtrooms or boardrooms. Justice is the moment you stop explaining yourself to people who only listen for profit. That night, I opened my ledger and wrote, Novad 12. Silence restored. Lessons filed. Family line redrawn, not erased. Then, one more note beneath it. A man's peace is the only inheritance he should never share. I closed the book, turned out the lights, and let the dark fill the house. Not as an intruder this time, but as an old friend taking its rightful seat. The weeks that followed felt like borrowed time. Quiet, careful, and unfamiliar in the best way. The constant hum of anxiety had finally gone still. I could sit on the porch again without checking the driveway every 10 minutes. The air off the marsh carried that winter salt smell that Ellen used to call the scent of survival. November 20th, 7:30 a.m. I brewed coffee and opened the green binder marked Lessons. The first page still read, Clean. Trust stands. Accounts sealed. House safe. Sometimes I'd flip through it like a hymnal, not out of obsession but gratitude. Proof has a rhythm, and I'd learned to live to its beat. At 10:12 a.m., my phone buzzed with a short email from Leighton, FYI. Horizon Ventures has officially dissolved its relationship with your son's project. No further action needed. Eli didn't smile. I just exhaled and whispered, so be it. That same afternoon, Rosa came over with groceries, eggs, canned soup, and a small envelope. Inside was a $327.50 refund check from Leighton's firm. Unused balance, the memo read. She grinned. You know you've won when a lawyer gives money back. Framed justice, I said, and slipped the check into the binder under finance. We ate lunch quietly. Then she looked at me over her fork. You think he'll ever apologize? I shook my head. Maybe not with words, maybe with time. And if he doesn't? Then I still sleep fine. That night, I went to the garage, not to check locks or evidence, but just to exist in the space again. The pegboard of laminated documents still hung there, neat and proud. The empty safe base gleamed in the lamplight. For a moment, I considered taking the whole display down, but something stopped me. It wasn't bitterness, it was memory. That wall wasn't about revenge. It was about learning the language of self-respect. At 8:17 p.m., a message came through from an unknown number. One line only. I know I messed up. Can we talk sometime? No name, but I didn't need one. I didn't reply right away. I stared at the screen for a full minute, watching the blinking cursor beside those words. Part of me, the father, wanted to answer immediately. The other part, the man who'd just built an unbreakable boundary, decided to wait. Instead, I walked to the window. The moon was bright enough to cast a soft reflection on the glass. In it, I could see both the house behind me and the yard beyond. Two worlds finally balanced. I picked up the phone, opened my recorder, and dictated a note for myself. Forgiveness is not a password. It's a gate you open when the visitor stops trying to pick the lock. Then I saved it and turned the phone face down. Over the next few days, small ripples of closure started showing up like the tide coming back. A letter from the compliance officer thanking me for my cooperation. A call from Dana saying the fraud alert system had been updated for senior accounts, using my case as a model. Even Troy stopped by with the F-100 keys shining in his hand. She's still purring, he said. And I topped off the gas. Figured she should come home. We rolled her back into the garage, the tires aligning perfectly with the marks they'd left weeks ago. The smell of oil and steel filled the air again. Clean, familiar, alive. I ran my hand along the hood. Welcome home, girl, I said softly. Before he left, Troy looked back and said, You know, not many men your age would have fought this smart. Not many men my age had to fight their own blood, I said. He nodded. Maybe that's what makes you different? That night, I took one last look at the motion speaker mounted above the door. I switched it off. I didn't need it anymore. The house didn't need to defend itself. It just needed to breathe again. At 10:30 p.m., I sat down with my ledger and wrote, Nov 20. Refund received. F-100 returned. Systems closed. He reached out. Not ready to answer yet. Then I added a final note beneath it, steady and unshaken. Peace earned is peace worth protecting. The porch clock ticked once. The air settled. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was surviving a story. I felt like I was living after one. December 3rd came soft, warm, and windless. One of those savannah mornings when even the gulls seemed too lazy to argue. I woke before dawn and sat by the window, coffee in hand, watching the light creep across the marsh. The house was quiet, and the air had that clean emptiness that only peace leaves behind. At 9:06 a.m., the mail arrived. Among the circulars and charity flyers was a thick white envelope with Ethan's handwriting on it. No return address, just my name, centered and underlined twice, the way he used to label his science projects in grade school. I hesitated before opening it. For a second, I thought about sliding it into the green binder with all the other evidence, leaving it sealed forever. Just another record of what was tried and failed. But curiosity, or maybe love disguised as curiosity, got the better of me. Inside was a short letter. Dad, you were right. I went too far. I thought I could fix everything by acting fast, by being bold. I thought, that's what you wanted from me. Turns out I was just being selfish. The investors dropped me. My partners moved on. And I'm working nights to cover what I owe. I don't expect forgiveness. I just didn't want to end the year without saying, I understand now why you fought so hard to protect what you built. You weren't guarding money. You were guarding dignity. Ethan and I read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it on the counter beside Ellen's photo. I didn't feel triumph, just relief. The kind that seeps in slowly, like light through old curtains. Later that afternoon, Rosa stopped by to drop off Christmas lights. "You're finally putting these up again?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Might as well remind the house it's still alive." She noticed the letter on the counter but didn't touch it. "You gonna reply?" "Not yet," I said. "Forgiveness should age a little before you serve it," she smiled. "You and your metaphors. Comes with the grease under my nails," I said. After she left, I went to the garage to hang the lights along the rafters. When I flipped the switch, the bulbs glowed warm gold against the walls. The pegboard of laminated documents still hung there, now dimmed by dust, but I left it untouched. A quiet museum of what it cost to keep my name mine. I took down the motion-activated speaker for good and placed it on the workbench. The small black box that once echoed Ethan's greed now sat silent. I looked at it and shook my head. "You played your part," I whispered. "Time to rest." As I was coiling the light cord, I heard footsteps behind me. My heart stuttered, but when I turned, it was Eli, my grandson. He'd gotten taller, almost up to my shoulder now. "Mom dropped me off," he said. "She said you might need help with decorations." "Always," I said, smiling. We worked together quietly, threading red and white lights along the eaves. At one point he paused and asked, "Grandpa, is the story true? That Dad took your money?" I kept twisting the wire. "Your dad made some mistakes," I said. "But he's learning from them." Eli nodded thoughtfully. "Mom says you forgave him." I looked at him and smiled. "I will," I said. "That's the easy part. The hard part was forgiving myself for not teaching him better." He seemed to understand in the way children do, not through words, but through silence. When evening fell, we stepped back to look at the lights. They shimmered softly against the dark, the marsh wind carrying their reflection across the water. I glanced at the garage door, that once felt like a battlefield. Now it was just a door again. I locked it out of habit, not fear. Before turning in, I opened my ledger and wrote the final entry. Deck 3, letter received. He finally saw what I was guarding. Forgiveness pending, peace intact. And beneath it, the line that closed this chapter for good. You didn't lose my money. You found your lesson, and I found my peace. I put the pen down, closed the ledger, and listened to the quiet hum of the house. It wasn't guarding anymore. It was simply living. Outside, the Christmas lights flickered gently in the cold night air, reflecting off the hood of the old Ford like distant stars finally coming home.